Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Delta Report on today's Thursday, the 28th of July, 2022. What will destroy us as a civilization? Well, not completely as a civilization, but what will bring us down something similar to what happened in the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. A dual world power, Anglo American dual world power. What is it? Well, the Allied forces during World War II. You have Great Britain. You have the United States joined together as a very powerful force, and it has been for the last number of years. This dual world power has dominated the world, something similar to the great power of the Roman Empire. So what can bring about its decline? There's two things I see out there right now. Two problems. One of them could cure itself, but it's unlikely at this point in time. But the other one is impossible. It's an absolutely impossible problem, and it's not going to be resolved until it destroys the empire. The empire being the world power. What's been the world power? Most powerful country on earth, even still. But there's rising economies, rising powers out there who have been called regional powers, but in fact they are Russia, I'm speaking about right now, is not. I don't consider them a regional power. I consider them because of the size and scope of their kingdom or their country. Takes up most of the Asian continent. It's absolutely huge. Russia's absolutely huge. And they've got everything that they need. They've got oil. They've got their own oil. They've got their own infrastructure. They've got their own... Well, you see what sanctions have done so far. Really. Is they are now calling the shots to Europe. Cutting off the gas pipelines. Then we have China. And China and Russia now are buddies. I'll just put it that way. They're buddies. Iran's hopped in there, and Iran's got tons of oil. And when you combine the forces of the BRICS nations, and Russia and China, and you combine that force together, what you have is like a very... It's almost like animals out in the wild, You got a lion. He's getting old. His teeth are starting to fall out, but he's the biggest lion out there on the biggest lion in the pride. And he's ruled the roost for many years, but he's getting old. And you got a new young lion with a very dark mane, strong teeth. This is the unified BRICS nations. You got the dual American world power, Britain and the United States. It's like the old lion. Still rules the roost, but this is a threat from the East. Now, I said at the start of this show, what could bring down this dual American world empire? It's just like the Roman Empire. What can bring it down? What can make it decline? And I mentioned two things. And one of the things is impossible to solve. It's a problem that can't be solved because of math. And so we know that this problem is going to extend, and it's going to bring down the dual American empire, the Britain and the United States, and the other countries that are linked to them, like Japan is linked to that empire. So is most of the countries in Europe under the NATO pact. Most NATO countries, and so on. Very powerful, though. Don't underestimate the power that they have, especially militarily. but there's a fault in their money. And the fault in their money was really started when they initiated the Federal Reserve in around, I think it was 1914. It became active. It wasn't a problem back then because the money was set up in a type of it is a Ponzi scheme, but it's set up so it does function and it relies upon global growth. Because the way it's set up, you have to always keep extending more debt to service the debt you've taken out earlier. Because as simple as this, I have to put it on a very small term so you understand how it functions. If you borrow $100 in that type of a system, they lend you the 100. Then there's interest on that $100 that you borrowed. That interest accrues and grows year after year and accumulates more and more interest owed on that $100. So you have to borrow more money to pay the interest because they do not create the interest to pay off the interest owing on the debt. And so as that debt grows over a period of like year after year after year after year, after a while it becomes larger than the outstanding debt itself. And this is where we are now. We have more interest owed on the outstanding debt than there is what we call money available. So you can't ever pay it off. You have to keep growing it. And of course, to curb inflation, what the central banks are trying to do is they are trying to pay off the debt, basically. It's a silly game. But ultimately, they have to do that because they have to keep creating more and more money, and ultimately it would end in a hyperinflation. It would end in the currency becoming worthless. And this is a problem in the system inherent in the money itself, what we call money, which is actually currency units, that cannot be erased. It cannot be you cannot get rid of it. And right now it's got to the point where we're losing at least 9% of the purchasing power of our currency every year. And people out there, now you got to understand, just a few years ago, it was only around 1.5% rate of inflation, so people were willing to save. But now that it's hit nearly 10%, and it's actually probably much higher, it's probably 15 or 20% in reality. People are getting so that they're not willing to save anymore. Most people are saying, hey, I'm not keeping my money in the bank. This is accelerating this process. And so this is a problem that will not go away, and this is one of the largest problems facing this declining empire, is the currency itself. And then we got a second problem. Remember I said the other problem could possibly be cured or cure itself, and it's a weather phenomenon problem. But it's a big one. It's probably one of the biggest ones I've ever seen, and this is in the 1930s, when we had money problems back during the Great Depression, we had something formed that was called the Dust Bowl out in the western part of the United States. But it did cure itself. We've got this problem all over again, except it's much, much larger. This time. It's a drought. It's a mega drought. It's the most enormous drought we've ever faced. And so far, it hasn't turned into that big of an issue. It's been talked about in the news, but it's not that big of an issue. But the potential of this is absolutely devastating. Just on Lake Mead alone, there's 40 million people that rely upon this water source, as well as food production and irrigation. And this is going to come to a head probably within the next year or two, if it's not resolved. And this is a big enough problem when you get 40 million people that face possibly having to move, or possibly not just water restrictions. The water restrictions are actually going to start within 2 weeks from right now. But not just water restriction, but no water. Where are they going to go? How do you deal with 40 million people or 40 million refugees within a country of 340 million people, which is the United States of America? Well, it can be dealt with, but it can create a very difficult situation. Now, when you combine that with a currency that's going defunct and possibly not even function properly, this could be as bad a situation as what happened in the Roman Empire while Nero fiddled, while Rome burned. But, okay, those people back then in the Roman Empire, they understood food production. Each and every person was, a lot of people were farmers, or at least understood how to create food for themselves. We've created an army of people in this modern age who cannot fend for themselves. They only know how to get food from the grocery store. So where's all this leading? To an economic disaster, and probably a climate disaster, an ecological disaster, all combined into one huge mess that could cost the lives of millions and millions of people. And could divide, just like conquering armies can divide a nation, this could be turn into an enormous problem. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe. We'll catch you guys in the very next show. Bye-bye.